All right, let's go back to talking about Russia, Ukraine and the impact of that crisis. In fact, oil prices as a result of all the uncertainty have jumped to an 8-year high amid fears of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. But what exactly does this mean and the implications for that on India? Because remember, India imports as much as 85% of crude oil requirements. So any spike in global prices has a direct impact on India, inflationary pressures here. But let's bring in more expert perspective here on this. Ajay Bagga is joining me here on the broadcast. Thank you very much, Mr. Bagga, for joining us. Your thoughts here in terms of the impact of this rising oil prices that India is going to see, because so far Reserve Bank has held the rate status quo. But if this continues, it could be forced to increase rates.
Yeah, overall, every 10% hike in oil means 0.5% increase in consumer inflation and 1% increase in wholesale inflation for India. And now the prices have not been increased at the petrol pumps for the last 90 days because of the election being there. And even though prices have been deregulated, we see that during elections, the state-owned refiners don't increase prices. So we are expecting anything from 8 to 10 rupees of increase on March 10th. Once the results are out, you could see that kind of a hike in the oil price. It is inflationary for India. RBI has a very clear eye on it. It's a cost push inflation more because of demand-supply mismatches. Russia is the second to third biggest, depending on that day's production, but it's the second to third biggest producer of crude oil. It has got very big reserves. Nearly 8.3% of oil globally is supplied on a daily basis by Russia. And if you look at Europe, then they get a big portion of their fuel requirements from Russia. So any conflict which disrupts this supply would lead to a very sharp spike in oil, more than $100 and beyond.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Bagga, you're saying that, once the elections are over, we're going to see a significant spike, 8 to 10 rupees spike in fuel prices. So what do you expect RBI's move to be? Because so far it has kept the rates status quo. And it has cited that it can't go lower for sure. But when that rate hike is going to come in has been the big question. Do you think that this could then lead to the rate hike coming in sooner than otherwise would have been the case?
We don't expect anything in April because RBI was very clear that they'll be calibrated, they will telegraph it, and previously they have mentioned that they will change their stance from accommodative to neutral before they go into a rate hike. So we are not expecting a repo rate, the lending rate to go up. The reverse repo at which RBI absorbs liquidity from banks, that might go up first in April. And then in the subsequent policy, we could start seeing rate hikes coming. But right now, the RBI governor was very clear that they are looking at growth. Growth has been unequal, growth has been uneven, and still there are pockets which need supportive policy. So they have stayed accommodative for now. But oil could change a lot of those equations. I would agree with you.
And in terms of, the other effects of this sustained increase in oil prices, how long do you think that, we'll have to wait for oil prices to be at the current levels or maybe move higher before we see that ripple effect happening? The rise in the fuel costs, which leads to rise in transportation costs and all other, essential commodities and items which do get impacted as a result of that. When would those effects then start showing up?
Within a month, it shows up. So as I said, March 10th itself, you will see the price hikes coming. At least 8 to 10 rupees is needed for the refiners. They are in losses right now. They're still pricing at $75 when the crude has gone to 95, 96. So at least 10 rupees you will see hike on March 10th. And it flows through almost immediately because all the freight costs have to be calibrated, and there will be strikes by the taxi guys and everything. Now, a lot of it runs on CNG, so we'll have to see that price also will go up. The city gas distribution companies are making losses because they're not able to pass on. Aviation, because it's not such a something in a public eye, we saw aviation being hiked by 5.2% last week. So aviation already is at an all-time high, and we are expecting petrol also to follow, diesel also to follow on 10th of March.
Right. And Mr. Bagga, one final question on, the outlook for oil prices itself, because we're already at a multi-year high at this point in time. Where do you see it going from here? How fast, if the situation between Ukraine and Russia sort of eases out in the coming days or weeks, when do you see the prices sort of starting to go on a downward trend? Any thoughts?
Yeah, there are two positives for it as far as India is concerned. One, we think Ukraine and Russia will get sorted out, especially with Biden, Putin looking at a summit. The foreign ministers are meeting on Thursday. We are expecting some kind of a breakthrough, so it should not get that worse. Second is the Iran deal seems to be just on the anvil. It looks like to be a week away. If that comes through and Iranian oil comes formally into the markets, informally, China buys it and changes the ships before they reach the Chinese ports to disguise that it's Iranian oil. But Iranian oil is very much in the markets. But once it comes in officially, it will break this geopolitical premium and the demand-supply mismatch premium that's really driving the oil prices. Otherwise, it's a well-calibrated market. Saudis have excess capacity, Iraqis have excess capacity. If they want to, they can bring the oil price down. They have, between them, they can produce 3 million barrels more per day, which is not getting produced right now. Rest of the world is constrained. But if the Iran deal goes through, that will be very positive for India because the prices will go down. And Iran is our traditional partner. We have not been able to engage with them, which the Chinese have been able to do, and they are benefiting from the lower Iran crude prices. That will be very positive for us. So I am looking for these two developments, which should happen in the next 10 days.
All right, Ajay Bagga, thank you so much for joining us and putting all of that into perspective with regard to the impact of this entire crisis on oil prices and as resultantly on India.